I'm in The Hague. We've travelled down from Amsterdam. The results are in, and it's a very clear win for the Liberals, which is Mark Rutte, the governing party. Last night he said that this was a vote for Europe, a vote against extremists. You're going to have 13 parties haggling it out to form a government here in The Hague. So when it comes down to the numbers, you saw a near 80% turnout in the polls, and that's very, very high relative to 2012, relative to 2006. So the Liberals, they are the victors here. It'll be up to Mark Rutte, we expect, to try and start the formation of a government, but could it take up to 200 days? That's the longest that it took at one stage. The Liberals, their vote was up, but they still have barely 12% of the vote here. The Greens did well. They nearly quadrupled their seats in this parliament, up to 15. So it could be that Jesse Klaver there is the rainmaker here. Let's get to Alex Dryden. He's joining Anna and I in the studio. So, Alex, the question for markets, we saw the euro spike aggressively. We're going to look at these spreads this morning. The question for markets, from my perspective, is have the Dutch built this firewall? Is Rutte right in terms of, you know, the people of the Netherlands have drawn a wall up against this populist wave?
Sure. Well, this Dutch election was always going to be a good test to see which way the populist winds were blowing in Europe, and it was the first real test that we've had in 2017 within the region. And it leads us, and it looks like those populist winds aren't quite as strong as we thought they were going to be. That leads us into the French elections coming up later on this year. Maybe we won't see such a strong gain for the National Front and other Eurosceptic movements across the region. That has obviously filtered into the positioning with the currency. The euro has rebounded quite aggressively. As the political mist clears, as people realise that maybe they were a little bit too worried about the risk of populism in Europe, the euro is likely to grind higher over the course of this year. And we may even start seeing some ECB tightening in the second half of this year once those political clouds begin to clear, giving more of an uplift to the single currency. Yeah,
sticking with the politics, Alex, so the euro, as you suggest, you know, getting that relief because Wilders didn't do as well as many had feared weeks ago. Those who didn't like his policies, of course, around the euro and being anti-Islam. This may be then called a centrist fight back, but if the centrist fight back has a weak spot, it may be on the left side, because the left didn't do very well in this election, just like the left is fighting for its own, to define itself, really, at the moment, in the face of the populist threat across Europe.
Yes, and this looks like it was, going into this polling, it looked like a centre-right, centre-left coalition was on the cards, but actually maybe it's going to be a slightly more left-leaning coalition of parties. We're still going to have to see some sort of agreement where it might involve maybe 3 or even 4 different political parties in the Netherlands. It'll be interesting to see how all of that wrangling plays out over the course of the next few days.
Alex, the chorus is rising. I'm just looking at some numbers here. So far, $1.2 billion has flowed into Europe versus last year, $113 billion left European equities. Are you tempted to scale in slowly ahead of the French elections? Does this embolden you in regards to the European equity story?
Yes, we've been talking about the opportunities in Europe for a little while, and this really adds some weight to that argument. It shows that some of the political fears were a bit overdone. When you're looking at US equity markets right now, trading on a forward price-to-earnings ratio at 17.7, that is 12% above its long-run average. It is not a cheap index anymore. Investors are looking for opportunities where they can find it, and Europe, by comparison, is looking pretty dirt cheap. Okay. Choose a sector, any sector, it is much cheaper than its American peers, and as the political mist clear, you might start seeing that.
Looking dirt cheap, Alex says. Alex Dryden still with us from JPMorgan Asset Management.